Cockfighting, dogfighting, midget wrestling, we've all heard of those. Let's talk about Icelandic horse fights. Imagine you're a Viking. It's the 900s, it's cold and dreary, and you're incredibly bored. What do? Well, consider attending a horse fighting tournament. The Hestapeng, as they called it, was a medieval equivalent of USC 1. People from different regions and clans would come together by a riverbed or by the foot of the mountains to watch a knockout tournament where horses would fight 3-4 fights in a day. You win your first fight, you move on to the next, then the next, until eventually you rise victorious. The owners did, at least, as the horses would be in pretty bad shape by the end of it. Icelandic horses weren't and still aren't very big, they're sort of furry and stocky, but they're strong and they'd bite and kick the living hell out of each other. Bouts could last anywhere from a few minutes to several hours, and it was common for them to get maimed or killed in the process. It's a bloody business and certainly very cruel by today's standards, so why did the Vikings do this? It was a form of entertainment, of course, but it was a lot more than just that. Like their descendants, the old Germanic peoples from Roman times, the Vikings lived in small villages and close-knit family units. These were largely independent and established relations with nearby communities. They'd meet every few months in public gatherings. The leaders would sort out political problems, make deals and alliances, while regular folks would mingle and feast. This was vital to Viking culture. It's where men met women from other clans, leading to marriages, and it's how a spread out people came together. Mead, beer, salted lamb, fish, and fruits would be passed around, and they'd have a jolly good time. And for fun, they'd run competitions, wrestling tournaments, swimming races, and of course, horse fights. These were big events, unlike cockfighting, where you could nab a chicken off the streets and fight it with your buddies. Horses were expensive, good fighting stallions especially so, and it wasn't worth risking them in fights unless you had a large audience. Showing off all your horses and putting on a good show would have been a great way to flaunt your wealth and expand your reputation, and to the Vikings nothing mattered more than status and renown. Big crowd from all over the region, drinking and talking politics and wanting to wind down watching some horse fights, there were few easier opportunities to make your name known. Now let's get into the mean nitty-gritty of it. Believe it or not, horses are not naturally disposed to beat each other half to death. They'd need some motivating. What the Vikings probably did is what Chinese and Filipino horse fighters do to this day. They'd get a mare in the heat and tie her down close by the fighting arena. Being in the heat, she's exuding mating pheromones. The stallions smell her sexual must and go crazy over that horse poontang. It's a scary thing, a stallion gone berserk over a mare, but they can't help themselves. They're acting on what evolution has had them do for thousands of years. And here lies a key difference between wild horse fighting and organized horse fights. Things get hairy, the losing horse bolts, and usually the winner will not go after him. Well, running ain't easy when your Viking owner is standing by with his staff ready to beat you back in if you give up too fast. Once things got started, people wanted blood, same as we do today watching the UFC or boxing matches, and the owners, they aim to please. So instead of the minor injuries the horses usually incurred in wild horse fights, the fighting stallions would endure broken ribs, bit off eyes, collapsed lungs, they'd just keep going. Now the owners had reasons for doing this beyond just mere entertainment. An old Norse saying went that the livestock is like its master, meaning that if a horse is cowardly it's because the owner is cowardly. It's rather ridiculous, but to the Vikings to whom valor and reputation mattered so much, this was a real concern. I'm not a coward, I'm not weak, so you, my horse, do not have a right to embarrass me or tarnish my name. I'm pushing you back in there and you're gonna fight and bleed and die if you have to, the same as I would if I were the one in the arena. And to the Vikings, this was entertainment. We've got to remember that these were different times. That these were the same people that pillaged most of England and sacrificed folks to the gods. It's an understatement to say their moral compasses were different from ours. Most of the information presented so far has been gathered from the sagas. They're the written histories and tales of the Viking Age Icelanders, dealing mostly with family blood feuds. If you're familiar with HBO's Vikings, these are where they got the bulk of their storyline from. Horsefighting plays a vital role in many of the sagas. They act as literary devices helping propel plots forward. So now, let me tell you the story of Gunnar's horse. Meet our heroes, great Viking warriors Gunnar and Skarphedin. They've been challenged by another family to enter their prize stallion into a horse fighting tournament. The families don't like each other, they're rivals, and that's all the more reason for our guys to show up. They want to prove themselves better than their opponents, and they want everyone to know that they're better, and the horse fight with a large crowd is an ideal scenario in which to do so. So coming into the scene, both parties want to one-up the other, and both sides sort of suspect that foul play will be involved once things get started. With this in mind, Gunnar and Skarphedin take a moment before the fight to decide on who between the two should be the staff bearer and be inside the fighting circle with the horses.
Gunnar, buddy, what if I lead our horse into the fight?
No, you're going to screw it up.
Man, they're crazy. You know they're going to start shit. I'm just as crazy, so I'll even it out for us. You go and the horses wouldn't even get to fight, you'd piss him off so fast. I go, we'll probably still have to shank some fools, but it's going to take longer.
That gives you a good idea of how these things usually went. The horse fight matters, but what's really at stake is your reputation. You want your horse to win, but more than that, you want to embarrass the other guys, and the most popular Viking ways of doing this were public shit-talking and ass-kicking. But I digress, let's get back into the story. So the great Gunnar leads the horse in and the bout starts. Horse rushing, horse biting and kicking. The rival horse owner is in the arena too. Him and Gunnar are circling the horses ready to push him back in if needed, but they don't have to. The horses are putting on a grand show. This goes on for a bit when, as expected, the opposing horse owner makes a move. He charges Gunnar, trying to push the horses onto him. Gunnar steps out of the way, avoids being toppled, and the scrum breaks out, with friends and family from both sides jumping into the fight. Gunnar and Skarphedin alone manage to thrash most of the other guys, so in frustration, one dude swings a club on Gunnar's horse. It lands on his face and blows out one of its eyes. Gunnar and his men win, their opponents running off or being dragged away, but now he's left with a wounded, half-blind horse. So what does he do? The one-eyed horse is put to death, decapitated, depending on the translation. He shall not live, a maimed and blemished beast. A fighting stallion that can't fight due to injury could still be ridden or used for labor. In the case of a lost eye, it takes some time for the animal to adjust, but in most cases, horses adapt to that fairly quickly. Gunnar's horse wasn't killed because it was too badly injured to keep on living. It was killed because it was a fighting stallion raised to fight, whose purpose was to fight, and to have it do anything else would have been shameful. For the horse's sake, for the sake of its honor and dignity, it was spared and put to death. Shame, dignity, honor, and renown. These were the pillars of Viking culture, and as mentioned before, they're what motivated the horsefight brawl in the first place. Horsefights were an ideal place to embarrass your opponents and make yourself look good. Not only do you get a large crowd, but the very nature of the event being a safe, sportive environment precludes things from getting too out of hand. This gave some folks a bit too much courage. They'd say and do things that they probably wouldn't do elsewhere, knowing that they're unlikely to get killed in a communal event around so many witnesses. There was a lot to gain and little to lose, or so they thought. The reality of it is that quarrels started in horse fights very rarely stuck to the arenas. Vikings had long memories, and it could take weeks or years, but public slights were usually answered with extreme prejudice. In the case of our friend Gunnar, his victory at the horse fight proved costly. The following fall, he and his brothers are ambushed by the same men they'd beaten. A harried battle ensues with the great Gunnar and his siblings cutting through swaths of enemies. Arms are cut off at the elbows, heads fly, and legs are hewed like timber, and by the end of it, 14 Easterling men lie dead at our hero's feet. But they're not alone. Gunnar's youngest brother, Hjort, dies, pierced through his chest. Throughout the following months, the men attack and kill each other, then meet in evil gatherings of things and all things to arrange settlements, only to fight again shortly after. Their embarrassment at Gunnar's hands in that earlier horsefight was always at mine, and they just kept after him until finally they ambush him in his hall and kill him. And his killers, they were probably pretty satisfied with themselves for a little while, but that didn't last long either. Gunner's friends come over when they hear the news and butcher most of the men involved. And this goes on and on and on, one family being offended and going after another family who are friends with this clan that then gets dragged into a fight. And all of this largely because of a horse fight, where men were insulted and Gunnar Stallion lost its eye. There's a reason you've probably never heard of horse fighting until today. It's mostly illegal, being considered cruel and inhumane. Of course, cockfighting and dogfighting are largely illegal too, and that doesn't stop people from doing it, but that does not seem to be the case for horse fighting. I looked around for modern reports of illegal horse fights in the Western world and was unable to find anything. The practice does live on, however, in Asia, with China, the Koreas, the Philippines, and Indonesia being infamous for winning horse fights to this day. It's a similar sight to what the old Vikings did, complete with fighting circles and guys with staffs corralling the stallions towards the center of the pen. Short of Vikings jumping in on the action, these are just as bloody as the Icelandic version from back in the day. I won't post them here, but you can find videos on Google. Just fair warning, don't watch them if you get queasy from this sort of stuff. It's awfully graphic. It's a tough nut to crack trying to stop horse fighting in these places. People have been doing it for centuries and it's become a tradition, a part of their culture. The Miao Chinese run bouts for New Year's, rural Filipinos do it all the time, even though horse fighting is illegal in the Philippines. There's quite a few animal rights organizations that try to put a stop to it, but especially in places like China where the government really doesn't care, there isn't much that they can do to intervene. My question to you is, should we intervene at all? Do we have a right to go there and tell them to change their ways because we don't think it's appropriate? And is it reasonable to justify animal abuse by saying it's a part of your culture, that your grandpas and your great-grandpas did it before you? I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially if there's any Chinese or Filipino folks watching with some first-hand experience. What's your opinion? Feel free to leave a comment below. And that's it, man. Viking horse fights. They liked fighting, they made horses fight. It reflected their time's values and gave them an opportunity to make a name for themselves, to quash feuds and to further feuds, to show off to the ladies. Horse fighting was a microcosm of Viking culture. Valor in combat, reputation, honor, shame, feasts, and entertainment. You get all of that just by zooming in and dissecting horse combat. As you guys can see, my light is dying, so let's wrap this up. Thank you for watching the first episode of Savage History, first of many, hopefully. Channel's all about badass weird history, so stick around if that sounds like something you'd enjoy. Next video is going to be about Napoleon's penis, so look out for the little corporal. This has been Felipe with Savage History. Thank you for watching once again, and I hope you enjoyed.